Welcome to Charlie Audiobook Stories. Please like and subscribe. It helps us more than you can imagine. Subscribing and leaving a comment helps this channel more than you know, so please feel free to offer suggestion for future audiobooks or to just say hi. Thank you for listening. We hope you have an excellent day. Note, I do not own the rights to this audiobook. This audiobook is under fair use law. For entertainment purposes only. All rights goes to the original author who wrote this excellent masterpiece. DM for credits removal. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, brands, media, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to an actual person, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. The author acknowledges the trademark status and trademark owners of various products referenced in this work of fiction, which have been used without permission. The publication, use of these trademarks is not authorized, associated with, or sponsored by the trademark owners. This book is intended for adults only. Spanking and other sexual activities represented in this book are fantasies only, intended for adults. The following story contains mature themes, strong language and sexual situations. All characters are 18+ years of age and all sexual acts are consensual. When Izzie ditched her maid uniform for a ballgown, she never expected to catch the attention of an alien prince. All I want is to return to Earth. After an alien abduction gone wrong, I was adopted by a noble Yazdi family, but now they treat me as little more than a servant. I'm so tired of saving up credits to take a ship home. At this rate, it will take years. When the king throws a ball to find a bride for his youngest son, I might as well attend and pretend to be normal for a night. It's not like a human will catch the prince's attention, right? When I bump into Cave outside the ball, the dreamy, bronze-skinned prince is actually interested in me. But I can't put my heart at risk, not when I can't stay on Yazd. These aliens aren't my family and this world isn't my home. But with Cave in my arms, do I really want to leave? Chapter 1. Izzie. The three suns of Yazd streaked golden light through my windows. I woke at the same time every day to watch them rise, starting with the smallest of the suns. Rasha. It shifted the sky from darkness to a murky red like the splatter of blood, but when its brighter sisters followed, Peri and Soraya chased away the blotching scarlet. For the scant minutes of brightness, I closed my eyes and breathed. The world was silent in between those seconds, the day still full of endless possibilities. But it never lasted. When all the suns broke the horizon, the bracelet at my wrist buzzed, notification after notification popping across the hollow screen. I flicked it closed and sighed. It was time to get to work. I pushed from my bed and crossed to my dresser. The width of my room traveled in 3 brief steps. The drawers squeaked when I tugged at them, carved wood scraping across carved wood. The piece had to be an antique, but Yazdi technology had stripped its value to 0. With a few taps of a materializer, gowns popped in and out of existence. After dressing, I crept through the grand house, avoiding all the creaky points on the 3 flights of stairs between my attic room and the main floor kitchen. Mez forbid anyone else be ripped abruptly from their sleep at dawn. My mother and sisters required a gentle awakening accompanied by a steaming pot of Zion and warm breakfast. I snorted lightly as I filled the kettle. No one in this house was a relative of mine, and referring to them as so always filled me with revulsion. I swallowed it down and plated the breakfast trays. There was no point in wasting energy on that. My sisters were their bitchiest first thing in the morning. Better to brace myself for any slights they would throw my way than wallow over calling them family. Assuming I survived Parvana's wrath first. When my hollow screen flickered again with an alarm, I pushed the levitating cart from the kitchen and up the stairs to the 2nd floor. The double doors to the master bedroom were ancient things, more tree than door, painted the green and orange of the Yazdi flag. Unlike other modern doors, these didn't automatically open with the wave of a hand. I knocked gently on the wood before pushing inside with a cheery, "Good morning, mother," on my lips. She didn't even glance my way as I circled her massive bed of lush pillows and placed her breakfast on her nightstand. She plucked at the cup, her orange-bronze skin spotted with age. "My Zion better be hot this time, Isabel." "It is." I knew because I'd burned my hand touching the cup. I didn't have the same affinity for heat as my Yazdi keepers. My mother and sisters all wanted their Zion scorching hot, just the way the Herculeans made the tea-like delicacy on its origin planet. Parvana continued going through her mail on her hollow tablet, flickering in the air before her. Unless she was issuing a command, she never had anything to say to me. I moved to open the thick curtains, revealing a stunning view of the garden, a nearly wild space of orange and red flowers. Thankfully, the Yazdi liked their nature untrimmed. Parvana let go of the gardener last month, and I barely had time to complete my chores as is. In the distance, over the rooftop of other houses, towered the purple Farzan mountain, capped with white tips. So much of Yazd was foreign even after a decade on the planet, but the snowy mountains always reminded me of home. Skiing in Utah with my real parents, my little brother racing me to the bottom. I had nearly forgotten Jacob's wild laugh, but I always remembered at the sight of the mountains. "Race you to the bottom, Izzie." Jacob disappeared in a wave of white powder, clumps flinging against my face. I wiped them away with my gloves. "No fair, you have a head start." "Guess you better catch him, then," Dad said, adjusting his goggles. Mom whacked him on the shoulder. Parvana let out a gasp, ripping me from my memory. One of my few good memories. I had been abducted at 12, but barely remembered anything of my childhood. The Yazdi doctors said whatever the slavers gave me messed with my memory. Thanks to them, I only had a few recollections of Earth and nothing of my kidnapping. The sole flashes of that were reduced to something about the birthmark on my neck and a twinge of pain when I got the scar on my palm. But despite Parvana's interruption, as I spun around, I released my clenched fists. Mother had a mean backhand. Better to let her think the angry child she had locked in her attic for weeks at a time had faded. This new Isabel's only concern was her mother's happiness. Had the Zion not been hot enough? Parvana didn't look pissed. She had all but jumped from her bed, her silky nightgown flowing willowy down her 6-foot frame. "Isabel, you're going to be very busy today." "What?" I started, but Parvana swept past me from the room. Odd. She never left the bedroom with her plate untouched or her dark, curved horns unpolished. I followed behind her, dreading the orders that would follow. She made her way down the hall toward her daughter's rooms. She pushed through Isfer's door first. In the darkness, Isfer groaned. "How many times do I have to tell you I want my breakfast later?" I stopped at the threshold as Parvana all but tugged her eldest from her bed. "Isfer, I have news that is worth ending your sleep." At her mother's voice, Isfer bolted up, rubbing sleep from her red and green kaleidoscope eyes. "What is it, mother?" She opened her mouth, but then decided against it. "Go get Esta, Isabel." Lucky me. Dragging her teenage daughter out of bed would be no pleasant task. With a few steps, I crossed the hall from Isfer's door to Esta's. I knocked once, twice, but she continued to sleep on. "Esta?" No response. I pushed open the door and peeked my head inside. "Esta?" Before I ventured further into the room, Parvana stormed through the door, nearly knocking me off my feet. "Can you do anything right?" I all but slammed into the doorframe, but bit my lip to stop my cry. I wouldn't give Parvana the satisfaction. She rushed around her daughter's grand bed and pulled the covers, startling Esta awake. "Esta, wake up." Isfer followed her in, pointedly ignoring me, and settled on a cushioned futon near Esta's Phrygian harp. Neither sister had an ear for music, but proper society expected all Yazdi daughters to play at least one instrument. With the exception of me, of course. "What is it, mother?" Esta asked, trying to pull her blankets back on. Parvana clapped her hands together. "His Royal Majesty is throwing a ball and we're all invited." Esta's jaw dropped, exposing a mouthful of sharp teeth, and his fur let out a high-pitched squeal. I fought the urge to cover my ears. It was nearly as terrible as her singing voice. Isfur rushed from the futon to her sister's bedside. There hasn't been a ball in the longest time. That's not even the best part. Parvana latched hands with her daughters, a terrible look of glee flooding her orange and blue eyes. As you know, Prince Kaveh is the last of the king's single children. In order to change that, the king has ordered every unmarried female must attend the ball for Kaveh to pick a wife. I could marry a prince? Esta shrieked. Her sister shoved her. The prince won't choose you, Esta. I'm older and prettier. I swallowed my snort. The Yazdi were humanoid enough, but their beauty standards were as alien as their planet. Their skin had to be more bronze than orange, their horns more black than brown, and their teeth more blunted than sharp. Esta had a mouth like a shark and his fur was like a walking carrot. Not ugly, but not traditionally beautiful either. Certainly not enough to catch the attention of a prince. Hush, girls. Parvana pulled her fighting daughters apart. You'll both get your chance to impress the prince tomorrow. Tomorrow? The word slipped from my mouth before I could reel it in. 3 pairs of kaleidoscope eyes flickered in my direction, ranging from disgust to annoyance. I stiffened my spine and pasted on a neutral smile. If the ball was tomorrow, I had a lot of work to do. Parvana would take her true daughters to the designers, but I'd have to whip something together from scraps. Not that Parvana cared about that. It will take days to order a custom gown design, ma'am. Which is why we'll be heading to the designers right away, stupid girl. Parvana climbed from Esta's bedside and rushed from the room almost as quickly as she had entered. She called back, get ready quickly, girls. We'll have to beat half the city there if we want a decent selection for our materializers. I followed Parvana, head down. Esta and Isfur started yelling at each other behind me, but I ignored 70% of what they said. On a regular day if Parvana planned to buy 3 new dress designs and the fabric of their materializers, I'd need to go to the market. Once in her room, Parvana entered her closet. A circular dais occupied most of the space, the latest materializer design, but the left-hand side of the room contained racks upon racks of jewelry. The last vestiges of the Xanthi family wealth, stored in a form easy to sell. After her husband died, Parvana had been left to manage the estate. Her poor investment choices and lavish taste quickly bankrupted them. On the outside, the manor was well kept with a beautiful foyer and sitting area, but there were wings of the house no longer in use. If guests couldn't see it, she left the rooms to crumble. Parvana started plucking at the boxes. Be discreet as always, but do it quickly. We'll need the credits in our account when we leave the designers today. Though I hated when the words left my mouth, I said them anyway. Yes, mother. When I turned on my heels, it took everything in me to suppress my smile. Parvana started sending me to the market to sell her jewels years ago. If she hadn't, I never would have amassed the credits I had stored under my mattress. It was the only place on the planet where I had something like friends. The jeweler and I had an agreement. He transferred most of the money into the Xanthi family accounts and skimmed a small amount off the top for me in old-fashioned coin. And one day, once I had saved enough, I planned to board the next ship for Earth. Chapter 2. Kaveh. Soraya's hope glided through the sky, the city far below my feet. Gulbar was an oasis in the middle of a desert, but from this height, the hustle and bustle of the city faded, only a beautiful melody of life remaining. It paired well with the dusky sky, a mix of vibrant purple and orange. I sighed, wishing I could stay up here forever. This was the perfect altitude. I could still see the city's twinkling lights and the whiff of clouds over my head. Picturesque and quiet, away from the formality and duty of my life. As the youngest son of the king of Yazd, I'd never have the same responsibilities as my older brother, but I still craved a simpler life. I had found one, too, for a moment. While stationed on Hathor, a neighboring, war-torn planet, I was simply Kev. My platoon trusted me to keep them safe. The camaraderie we formed while fighting the armed militias that overthrew Hather's government was a bond second only to my friendship with my elder sister. But all of them were gone now. My friends returned to their planets and my sister long in the ground. My comms crackled as command issued instructions. Unit 425, engage in defense formation code Shirian. Out of the corner of my eye, 2 gliders of similar size to mine descend into my blind spot. This was what I'd been waiting for. Adrenaline pumped through my veins. I pushed at the Hope's controls, spinning her into a perfect downward spiral beneath my enemies. I had access to their vulnerable engines. I fixed my laser systems on them but held my fire. Mez, Faro cursed from his glider. How did you do that, Your Highness? I couldn't stop smiling. While this wasn't Hather, I still had a purpose here. Training the next generation of Yazdi pilots was honorable. I'll show you. Pilots, return to Royal Airfield. I frowned. Since Yazd wasn't engaged in any wars, the drills we engaged in were short, but never that short. I had planned to teach my 2 students the move I used on them today. Perhaps the Parliament had slashed funding for elaborate training exercises again. I needed to speak to my father. He'd listen to me, but what would he ask me to sacrifice in return? My father was pushing for me to settle down, and that meant leaving my post in favor of a life at court. As I touched Soraya's Hope to the ground, I noticed my attendant, Maven, waiting for me. That was never a good sign. Maven had served me for years, but he rarely reached out during the day. If he was here, there was a change to my usual schedule. I straightened my shoulders and climbed from the glider's front seat, bracing for whatever order would come next. Maven wasted no time. His Royal Majesty wishes to speak with you. What about? He didn't share the details. How encouraging. All right, let me get cleaned up first. Maven winced. Your father requires your presence immediately, Your Highness. Of course he did. Patience was not one of King Adashir's virtues. I let out a frustrated groan, but what could I do? Lead the way, then. Maven and I walked through the palace's many courtyards in silence. We didn't need to speak, not after years together. As one, we turned into a smaller courtyard used by my parents to entertain dignitaries. Orange azar flowers specked the entire area, the plant a favorite of my mother. Like most Yazdi, she liked her nature wild, her flowers creeping over the surfaces of anything they could reach. Under a veranda, my parents sat at a table of ornate metals and jewels. I almost stumbled at the sight. After my sister's death, she rarely ventured from her private suite. This must be important. My father fussed over my mother, gesturing at the plates piled with steaming food spread before her. Eat, Mina, please. I'm not hungry, my mother said, pushing away a plate. Mina. My father let his sentence trail off when I came into view. Ah, Kave. Come, sit. I stopped before the table and bowed my head. Whatever my father wanted to say to me, he could say it while I stood. Father. Mother. My father's kaleidoscope eyes, both green and blue like mine, hardened. He crossed his hands on his lap, going from loving father to king in a moment. You've been back from your tour for 6 months. That is correct, he knew it was, so the topic must have been sensitive, even for a king. And despite the many females put forth by our allies, you've yet to choose a wife. Were they not up to your standards? Mez. Not this again. Since I arrived home from Hather, ladies from Yazdi houses and princesses from across the galaxy had found the time to visit our palace. My sisters-in-law had officially entertained them, but I knew why they had come. They were all beautiful and intelligent, father, but I'm not ready to choose a wife yet. He slammed his hand on the table, making my mother jump. I almost rushed to her side, but she settled quickly. And yet you must, Kave. It's your duty. But I didn't want to do this. Did my feelings not matter? I focused my attention on my father as my mother appeared lost in her thoughts, her gaze over my shoulder. Unlike most Yazdi, her eyes were silted and solid-colored, inherited from her Herculean grandmother, in time, father. No. As you're not making a selection on your own, you've forced my hand. I will hold a ball tomorrow for you to select a bride from the eligible females. Only Yazdi nobility received an invitation. With your brothers married to royals from other worlds, you must strengthen our bond with our own people. I gritted my teeth. Is that an order, Your Majesty? My mother cleared her throat, stopping my father from shouting. Please, Kev. You must select a partner. Building a family with your father and seeing my children grow has been the greatest joy of my life. I want the same for you, my son. Saying no to my father was one thing, but fighting with my mother was not something I was capable of, not after Zyra's death. She rarely spoke when my father talked about royal business. This must be important to her. My claws nearly pierced my skin, but I managed a nod. I will try, mother. She beamed back at me with a mouth of sharp teeth. I hadn't witnessed her smile in years. Maybe the ball wouldn't be entirely unbearable. I tried to grin back, but I couldn't manage it entirely. Every female interested in me had always wanted my title, not me, not Keve. And now my father had gone and thrown a ball, inviting all the hunters to see their prey, me. Is that all, father? I asked. He nodded. For now. Then I have much to prepare. I hadn't attended a ball since I left for Hathor. What did one even do at a fancy party? Good day, father. Mother. I turned on my heels and exited the courtyard. Mavend reappeared from where he had faded into the shadows, loyal and at my side, as always. But even with him, I couldn't fully connect. Since Zyra's death, I had been a stranger in my own family, in my own home. We all tiptoed around each other, stuck in our separate grief. Dozens of females would compete for me tomorrow, but none of them knew what they were getting into. How could I inflict this mess on someone else? But it wasn't like I had a choice. Chapter 3. Izzie. Stifling a yawn, I gently closed the supply closet and pressed my forehead against the cold surface. The scent of fake azar petals tickled against my nose, the front foyer polished to within an inch of its life. Or, more accurately, within an inch of my life. In the 24 hours since learning about the ball, my stepmother had assigned me nearly 100 tasks. My fingers ached from tailoring adjustments to my sister's gowns all day and my own all night. Pushing from the closet, I rubbed at my hands, thumb grazing the straight line of my scar. The cleaning products had stained my skin a faint blue, but it would wash out. If not, it matched the shade of my dress perfectly. Yazdi rarely wore the color, and the markets had piles of the shade for almost free. It wasn't like I would catch the attention of a prince, anyway. I climbed the stairs, passing my sister's rooms on the second floor. All three of my family members had been stomping across the manor for nearly an hour, wrapping their hair in elaborate hairstyles or applying the latest rouge, no doubt. I'd barely have time to brush my hair, much less style it. Grabbing the banister to the third floor staircase, I put a foot on the step. A loud squeak echoed through the hall. Isabel! Parvana shrieked from her room. What took you so long? I frowned. If anything, I was ahead of schedule, but none of my family had worked a day in their lives and had nothing to compare against. I was finishing my chores. I'm done earlier than usual. Really? Parvana appeared in her doorway. Behind her, Esta attempted to tighten the laces of Isfer's dress. Are you sisters ready for the ball? I think not. I gritted my teeth. My gaze drifted up the stairs, towards my room and my gown. Once I helped Esta and Isfer, I'd have to throw my dress on if I wanted to travel with the family. The invitation had included transport codes into the palace itself, but I forced my lips into a smile. I'm sorry. Parvana slid out of the way as I entered her room. Esta had somehow strapped her sister into her dress, the eldest Xanthi's sister seated before a vanity. I approached. Esta rammed into my shoulder as she passed, nearly knocking the breath from me. I gasped, but held myself steady. "If the prince doesn't notice me, it'll be your fault, Isabel," Esta said. Isfur snorted, but I kept my smile large. "We have plenty of time." A lie, but Esta didn't need to know. My second sister had yet to put on her gown, but between the materializer and my needlework, it'd fit perfectly. Helping the two with their makeup would be far more work. "You'll both be the most beautiful at the ball. No one will compare, not even me." The room dipped into silence as Isfur twisted around and Esta stopped before the materializer. But it was Parvana who broke the quiet. "You." A chilling dread climbed my throat. "Of course your invitation," said every eligible female. Isfur and Esta broke out into giggles. Can you even imagine her at the ball? As if the prince would have any interest in a human. I stiffened, but not at my sister's words. I knew that. I wasn't going to lure a prince. This ball was the only escape from this life of endless chores. At the rate I was saving credits, it'd take another decade to have enough for a ticket home. Earth only joined the Intergalactic Alliance a few years ago and had a single ambassador on Herculeos. There was talk of them opening more embassies, but until they did, I'd have to pay my own way back. Until then, this was all I had. "Girls, enough," Parvana snapped. My sisters quieted, annoyed pouts on their faces. "Isabel is correct that every eligible female citizen is to attend." I nearly gaped. Out of every response imaginable, Parvana siding with me was the least likely. She only defended me to her friends because she could use it to mention how generous she was in adopting a poor, abandoned human for whatever reason, either through accident or intention. The slavers who abducted me from Earth abandoned me in an escape pod. The Yazdi found me after the pod nearly crashed into the moon. The event had made every news channel, both because of me, a child from a planet unaware of aliens, and because of the still unsolved mystery of my slavers. Their ship hadn't registered on any Alliance scanner. But how did my attending the ball benefit her? "But she'll only embarrass us, mother," Isfur whined. Parvana bared her sharp teeth. "That she would, if she were going." I tried to stay neutral, but I couldn't help my flinch. What was I thinking? There was no way Parvana would ever defend me. "But you just said I could, mother." She crossed to my side and stroked a hand across my cheek. Like I was a pet instead of a daughter. "You're not eligible, Isabel. You're human. The king doesn't want a human bride for his son. That was trendy when Earth first joined the Alliance, but not anymore. Please." I hated begging her for anything, but I couldn't keep the plea from my voice. At age 12, my world had quickly constricted from an entire life on Earth to a slave ship to the four walls of this house. All my heart desired was a night of dance and food. Without it, could I hold on until I saved enough credits? "I promise I won't so much as look in the prince's direction. I just want to go to the party." "Wearing what?" Esta jutted her chin at my stained dress. "That dirty apron. You will stay at home." With a final pat to my cheek, Parvana crossed to her daughters. Her true daughters. "You'd only bring dishonor to this family's name." My fingernails stabbed into my palm, but I needed to keep calm. If I tried to fight Parvana on this, she'd lock me in my room. But if I copied the transport code and waited for them to leave? I smiled demurely. "Of course, mother, I'll stay here." Chapter 4. Izzie. I inhaled sharply, my fingers hovering over my holoscreen. Parvana and my sisters had left for the ball nearly half an hour ago. I wouldn't run into them on the way there, but what about once I got inside? If they caught me, what would they do? This was silly. It put everything I had planned for years at risk. If they searched my room and found my credits, I'd never get off Yazd. But I was tired of working. tired of mopping and scrubbing and polishing until my body ached. For one night, I wanted to be the lady people outside this house thought I was. And tonight, I looked the part. I brushed a hand down the glittering blue bodice over a full skirt of flowing fabric. When I had spun around in front of the mirror, the color had rippled like water. Yazd was mostly desert, but I had spent hours swimming in lakes at home. My mother, my real mother, had called me her little water baby. This was my homage to her, though she'd never see it. But wherever she was, she'd want me to live my life to its fullest. I tapped the transport code into my holoscreen. A faint buzz tickled up my spine before the world around me changed in the literal blink of an eye. The fake elegance of the Xanthi Manor became a high-ceiling room of carved sand-colored stone, painted arches in the shape of a horseshoe dividing the space into separate halls. I appeared in the middle of the third hall, far from the music and dancing guests. Guards circled the carpeted landing area, their breastplates displaying a griffin-like animal, the royal Shirian. I peeked around the guards at the guests in the second hall, but didn't spot any of my family. Thankfully. The monsters had left an hour ago. In a room this size, hopefully we'd never cross paths. I might be an outlier in a crowd of bronze-skinned, horned aliens, but at my height, it'd be easy to duck around them and hide if my sister spotted me. A soldier waved me forward before tapping at her wristband. My own pinged back a reply. I was legally a Xanthi and probably on the guest list, but with the royal family at stake, security couldn't be too careful. The guard tapped at her holoscreen for a moment. The strong urge to slip off my shoes overwhelmed me, like at an airport back in the US. The guard stepped out of my way. "Welcome, Lady Xanthi." I almost snorted. Lady Xanthi. I was barely Isabel Xanthi, much less that. Out from the landing circle, I quickly swept into the crowd. Kaleidoscope eyes flickered my way, some with curiosity and others with familiarity. When I was younger, Parvana loved bringing me to all the society events. I recognized some faces, but I had never been privy to any names. While my sisters had run off with their friends, I was expected to stay nice and quiet at Parvana's side, more accessory than child. And now that I was alone, that didn't change. Ladies and lords quickly turned their attention back to their drink and gossip. Some probably talked about me and my obnoxiously blue dress, but most dismissed me quickly from their minds exactly how I liked it. Through the crowd, I spotted a fountain lined with cups. I made a beeline for the refreshments. A little liquid courage couldn't hurt. I quickly dipped my cup before taking a sip. A flavor almost like an orange exploded within my mouth. I chugged it down, uncaring about whatever unknown effects the Yazdi alcohol would have on a human. I drifted from the drinks to a table lined with sweet nibbles dusted with pink and purple kata nuts. I loaded an entire plate. I hadn't eaten this well in years. Parvana kept me fed, of course, but she relegated me to her scraps most days. The last time I had tasted a treat was when Lord Xanthi lived. It had been his decision to adopt me, saving me from an uncaring foster system. I couldn't be returned to Earth, not with the knowledge I had of outer space. If he hadn't passed years ago, perhaps I'd have been raised a true Xanthi lady. A female in a red hoop skirt bumped into me, nearly launching me into the dessert table. "Excuse me," I said, dropping my head. Her eyes widened at the sight of me. "What is an earthling doing here?" I faked a smile and quickly skirted around her. Whatever happened, I couldn't draw attention. That should be easy enough. Most of the partygoers congregated at the far end of the third hall, where a massive stone dais erupted from the floor. One by one, Yazdi approached the thrones, where King Adashir sat alone. His wife, Queen Mina, had gone into seclusion after the death of their daughter years ago. Two of his other sons sat on small chairs around the king's throne, accompanied by their spouses, but the seat of honor at the king's right was empty. Prince Kave had yet to arrive. I picked a spot in the corner by a curtained hallway and settled in to people watch. A nervous energy had settled over the crowd, lords and ladies eagerly awaiting the arrival of the prince. What would he think of their daughters? His brothers had married a princess of Hercleos and a duchess of Dura. In comparison, Prince Kavea's marriage to a mere lady of Yazd was almost boring. My eyes scanned the crowd again and clashed with a pair of familiar orange and blue eyes. Shit. Esta. Without thinking, I nearly flung myself behind the curtain. My heart nearly ripped through my chest, but I had to check. If she had truly spotted me, I needed to get home before Pravana did. I pulled at the curtain and peeked through a slit of space. My youngest sister pulled on Isfer's sleeves, a frown creasing her forehead. Isfer whacked at her hand while laughing at something one of her friends said. Esta continued to glance around, but she seemed more confused than sure of herself. Luckily she had seen me and not Isfer. There was no tricking that one. I popped back behind the curtain, and back to the wall, I sunk to the floor. Thank Mez. The Yazdi supreme goddess had looked out for me, for once. I inhaled to steady myself, but a little giggle escaped my lips, whether it was relief over not getting caught or the absurdity of me, plain ol' Izzie, being in the palace, I wasn't sure. Or maybe it was just the alcohol. Borderline hysterical, maybe, but I didn't care. Are you well? I nearly shrieked. The hallway appeared empty when I first entered, but a male stepped from the darkness at the far end. Stupid Yazdi and their amazing eyesight. The figure coalesced into a tall figure with curved black horns over dark hair and bright bronze skin. Sun-shaped military badges lined his shoulder, marking him as some sort of official. Unlike my sisters, I had never learned to read rank. But my focus quickly left his chest, tracing the sharp lines of his chiseled face to a pair of enticing blue and green kaleidoscope eyes. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I'm fine, thank you. It was just a little overwhelming out there. To my surprise, he sank down into the space across the hall from me and propped a muscled arm on his knee. I feel the same way. Which is why I'm hiding out here. The warmth in his voice conjured a blush to my face. Was he flirting? I wouldn't know. I had never talked to a male around my age. Sorry to invade your secret spot, then. No worries. He extended his hand. I'm Kev. I stared at his outstretched palm. His nails were long and dark, more like claws, but it was the scars on his hand my eyes traced. Not like the clean line of a slaver's knife on mine, but small little marks in the bronze. When I didn't respond, he frowned. Is this not how people on your planet greet each other? You're an earthling, are you not? I jolted. What was wrong with me? Who became enraptured by the very sight of a male's hands? I swung my hand up and towards him so fast I nearly slapped him. It is, but it's just been so long since I shook anyone's hand. His lips flickered, a slight quirk at the edge of his mouth. He put his other hand on top of mine, encompassing me within his warmth. At the slide of those rough, scarred hands against my skin, tingles crawled by arm and down my chest. I shuddered. Noticeably, since his half-smile grew. It's a pleasure to meet you. Izzie. Izzie, he repeated, like he was tasting my name on his tongue and enjoyed the flavor. An odd warmth pooled in my stomach. I know we just met, but you wouldn't want to get out of here, would you? My mouth popped open. He wanted to go somewhere with me. That was definitely flirty, wasn't it? But I was a human, too short, too pale. Not at all attractive by Yazdi standards. But despite that, I wanted to go. I had come to the ball to be a different person for a night, something more than a slave. But out there, I was either Pravana's pathetic rescue or a stranger from another planet. I didn't belong any more here than I did at home. In Kev's eyes, I wasn't any of those things. He looked at me, the real me, nothing else. He might be a complete stranger, but I didn't care. He had been kind to me, and, yeah, he was insanely hot. I was either going to have the best night of my life or get murdered. Where to? He gave my hand a light squeeze before pulling me to my feet. Someplace special. Chapter 5. Cave. Right this way, my lady. I pushed the branch of a lela tree from the path, allowing Izzie to pass by my side unharmed. The untamed wilderness of Yazdi gardens called to a primal instinct within me, but I saw why other cultures trimmed their gardens. In the few minutes we had walked outside, I already had to stop 3 times and help untangle my companion. Thankfully, her gown was Yazdi made and meant to withstand our nature. She smiled up at me. What a gentleman. Hardly. With the worst of the lala branches behind us, I offered her my arm. Her hand warmed through my sleeve. It's nothing less than my duty. And what else is your, she gestured to my shoulder, where my sun medallions rested, duty. She somehow made the awkward question adorable and also triggered questions of my own. She wore a Yazdi-style dress and spoke the language without the help of a translator, yet couldn't read my medallions. I'm a pilot and completed a tour of Hathor last year. We helped the resistance fighters reclaim the capital. Her eyes widened. I read about that on the news. Is that why you were at the ball? Are you a war hero of some kind? I quickly pushed away my shock. She didn't know who I was. Surely all eligible bachelorettes had studied my profile before attending my father's farce of a ball. I almost told her who I was, but Izzie was a mystery I wanted to solve. And if I told her I was a prince, why did I have the feeling she might run and not give me the chance? You could say that. Have you traveled to many planets? There was something in her voice, something unasked. I've had the honor of seeing most of the Intergalactic Alliance. Even, she paused, like she needed to summon the courage to say the word. Earth? Out of everything she could have said, I hadn't expected that. She was an earthling. Why ask about her home like it was forbidden? Twice, I replied. Once as a child and once more recently as a friend of mine lives there with his human wife. Her eyes widened, her pupils near black in the night. I have so many questions from that sentence alone. That's exactly how I feel about you, my lady. Red crept across her cheeks. It took everything within me to suppress my smile at her embarrassment. But luckily, we had reached the edges of the garden, where shrubbery turned to dark tarmac. I tapped at my wristband, awakening the royal airfield. Light sparked, illuminating a hangar made of stone with dozens of wide doors. One door raised as Soraya's hope floated into the open air. Izzie let out a slight yelp at the sudden light, but at the sight of my glider, a jolt flashed through her. We're going flying? I did mention I was a pilot, didn't I? She playfully whacked my shoulder, her earlier nerves completely gone. Are we even allowed to be out here? Don't worry about it. Prince Cave was certainly allowed out here, but no regular military officer could use a royal plane without permission, war hero or not. But she started forward, too enraptured by the idea of my ship to think about the holes in my story. If I told her who I was, everything between us would fall apart. For some reason, I didn't want it to. I dreaded forced polite conversation with strangers, but despite only meeting Izzie minutes ago, all my reservations were gone. When she had flung herself past the curtain into the hall, I had nearly stayed in the shadows. But the same thing that had me stepping forward was the same thing that made me want to speak with her even more. My father was certainly cursing my name to Mez right now, but I didn't care about politics or marriage right now. All I cared about was Izzie. I reached for her hand before crossing the tarmac to Soraya's hope. As we approached, the roof slid open to reveal 2 seats in the front and 2 in the back. When we reached Soraya, Izzie drifted her hand across its sleek edges like one greeted a prized animal. I copied the motion beside her. In a way, my glider was like a pet, something to distract my mind and keep me company. I had more connection with its metal and wire than I did with my own family. What's her name? Soraya's hope. Izzie glanced at me, her dark eyes curious. After one of the sun goddesses. You know your Yazdi gods. I've lived here for years. Curious. Capital cities like Gulbar attracted residents from all intergalactic alliance planets, but Earth had only joined recently. Had I read something about an Earthling child crashing here years ago? I reached for the memory, but couldn't grasp it. Why Soraya? Izzie asked. My mother always told me stories about Soraya running from her sisters. At her frown, I continued, you know the gods, but not the stories. No one ever shared those parts. I'll have to tell it to you someday. Someday. Like this wasn't a fleeting thing, over in an hour. A splash of pink colored Izzie's cheeks, a beautiful shade. I'd like that. I tapped at my hollow screen, ordering Soraya's hope to hover closer to the ground. When it lowered, Izzie almost yelped. She stumbled back into me. I caught her in my arms, my hands sliding down her soft skin. A tingle crawled from my palms to my shoulders, shivering up my neck and tracing down my torso. It sparked a heat within me, a pounding urge to claim her. My entire body tensed, but I kept a smile on my face. I had never reacted like this to any female. Desire, yes, but not this overwhelming urge to mark her, make her mine. The Yazdi didn't mate like that, but something within me roared, uncaring. I shoved it down, pushing it deep within me. Whatever it was, I couldn't let it surface, not now. Izzie was far too gentle, far too frail for that. Instead, I waved my arm at the ship and offered her a hand. After you, my lady. She accepted my offering. Thank you, my lord. I'm no lord, I said almost automatically. And maybe I'm no lady. She said it with a smile, almost flirtatiously. I couldn't help but return the look. After Izzie settled into her seat, I swung into the one beside her and synced my wristband to the steering. Holographic controls popped into the air in front of me. Izzie watched, enraptured, but didn't speak. When was the last time she had traveled in a spacecraft? I wanted to know everything about her, but asking all the questions I had would require the entire night. With a final tap to my hollow screen, the engine revved. Hold on. Izzie gripped the sides of her seat, fear and excitement warring on her face. I pulled back the controls, launching us into the sky. Izzie scream-laughed as we climbed high into the air above Gulbar. I roared alongside her. Nothing compared to flying, nothing at all. My heart pounded with the thrill and with Izzie's presence. When we reached the right altitude, I leveled Soraya's hope out. From this angle, the city was a splatter of twinkling lights and distant music, alive and near yet also so very far. Izzie let out a breathy laugh. That was awesome. Like a roller coaster ride, almost. It took a moment for the earthling word to register. Yes, like a roller coaster. I've been on one of those before. You have? Long before Earth joined the Alliance, my family went on vacation there. Few other Yazdi families could say the same, but there were some benefits to being royal. We used cloaking devices to disguise our appearance and visited Adventureland. Her eyes widened. Actually. I nodded. Though the trip had happened years ago, I remembered it like it was yesterday. My sister, Zyra, and I had raced each other to the start of the roller coaster ride over and over again. If either of us had been making the decisions that day, we'd have never left. If we hadn't, maybe Zyra would still be alive. My smile slipped, but I forced the expression to stay on my face. For Izzie's sake. In her seat, she seemed caught up in her own memories. Were they a combination of joy and sadness like my own? I loved Adventureland as a child, she said quietly, talking to herself more than me. That wouldn't do. Izzie deserved happiness. I wanted to hear that euphoric laugh from her again. I tapped at my hollow screen and the storage between our two seats slid back and out of the way. While Adventureland's roller coasters are fun, they can't top my glider. Izzie perked at the sound of my voice, dragging herself from her thoughts. When she spotted my glider morphing, she raised her eyebrows. Can't they? Nope. With the storage unit out of the way, I flipped a switch. The bottom of the glider flickered from solid black to transparent flooring. Gulbar wasn't only on the horizon now, but like a moving piece of artwork at our toes. Izzie squealed and pulled her feet off the floors, but that didn't stop her from leaning forward to get the best view. Oh my, that's incredible. I could sit here for hours. I dropped my hands from the controls as the glider switched to autopilot. This wasn't a war zone needing my constant attention. I was here for Izzie. I do sometimes. That sounds lovely. My throat suddenly went dry. Was I nervous? No. But when I asked my question, I nearly stuttered. Do you want to just sit? I'd love that, Kev. Chapter 6. Izzie. When my feet again touched the tarmac of the Royal Airfield, I nearly crumpled, the tingles of thrill traveling through me almost numbing. I had witnessed both Earth and Yazd from space, but I had never flown over Gulbar. The buildings and twinkling lights were beautiful up close, but nothing compared to the view from the sky. Gulbar stretched across the desert, far larger than I ever comprehended. I spun toward Kev. That was the best date I've been on in years. Shit, date? That wasn't a date. We had escaped the ballroom together, but that didn't mean anything. Or, sorry, the best outing. Kev grinned, flashing an edge of his fangs. Something stirred within me at the sight. Why couldn't it be a date? That something turned into a flush of heat, spreading from my core to my face. You seem great and I had a lot of fun, but, his eyes remained intently on me. Dating isn't something I see happening for myself anytime soon. His smile didn't lessen, but it changed, quirking at the edges. I see. We only have this one night, then. But did he see? I couldn't date, not if I didn't have any time to myself. Parvana expected me to be on call all day night. If I risked that with a boyfriend or any friend, I risked my one way off this planet. Kev. He closed the distance between us. A panic welled within me until his large hands settled gently on the side of my face. His thumbs rubbed against my cheeks, the roughness of his skin creating sparks against mine. May I kiss you, Izzie? Everything within me went silent at those words. The universe narrowed to Kev's swirling eyes and the warmth flooding through me, like the glow of a fireplace. I should say no. I should turn him away and leave this place before I did something stupid. Yes. The quirk at his lips became a full-blow grin. Kev closed the remaining inch between us. The softness of his mouth grazed against mine. At his kiss, the peaceful fire within me turned into a burning inferno. I trailed my hands across his chest and tangled them in his lapels. A soft sound escaped me, nearly a desperate whimper. Kev wrapped his arms around me, deepening our kiss. He skimmed my hands up his neck until I touched the silky edges of his hair. I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't care. The solid heat of his body pushed me into a frenzy. I gripped a hand around his curved horns. He growled, a deep rumble. The heat within me dipped, awakening something in my core. An itch I wanted to scratch. I pressed against him. He nipped at my ear. Come home with me. His words splashed chilling water on my desire. I pushed at his chest. What? We can continue this in my bedroom. A flushing heat spread across my face. Bedroom? Did he want to have sex? I couldn't do more than gape at him. I had learned the basics in elementary school, but I was a virgin. Trapped in a Xanthi household, romance had never been on the table, never mind sex. But for some reason, I wanted to say yes to him. I had stared too long, the space between Kev's brows creasing. That is if you want to. The heat within me dropped lower, twisting into an almost throbbing sensation. Hell yes, I wanted to. But I couldn't. I couldn't go to his house and spend the night like a regular Yazdi. I was anything but. I pushed out of his arms. No. Kev let me go, but disappointment and confusion washed across his handsome face. No. I'm not. How did I explain this? I wanted him, but I couldn't. I can't. He straightened, masking his emotions. I apologize, Izzie. I've made you uncomfortable. Allow me to escort you back to the ball. What a gentleman. The urge to close the distance between us spiked. How dare he be perfect and kind and drool-worthy? The exact male I'd want, if I weren't basically a slave. I backed away from him slowly, careful to not trip over the trim of my dress. Oh, no, it's fine. It's not far, I'm sure I can find my own way back. It would be no trouble. I waved away his words and nearly ran into the garden. If I didn't leave now, I never would. It was nice to meet you. But what if I want to see you again? Kev shouted. I hummed as I polished the post of the foyer's grand staircase. My knees and elbows were sore, but I barely noticed. Not after the events of last night. I had transported back to the house after leaving Kev in the garden, beating my family home by hours. When they had returned after midnight, intoxicated and loud, Parvana had summoned me to collect their dresses and jewels like nothing had happened. Even Esther had forgotten she saw me. But why would they suspect anything? I had been obedient for more than a decade. Why would I start rebelling now? I'd succeeded at my first real adventure. I had left the palace and pretended to be more than a maid for a night. A handsome Yazdi male had escorted me through a garden and stolen my first kiss in the moonlight. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face just thinking about Kev. He was one of the few people who had bothered to look past my human appearance and get to know who I was. Our conversations came so easily and he made me laugh genuinely for the first time in so long. He had been perfect, well, perfect until he invited me to his bed. My cheeks flushed at the memory. If only I weren't a maid. Sure, I was a virgin and afraid of embarrassing myself, but maybe Kev would be an excellent teacher. He'd know exactly how to please a female. His mouth would trail from my lips, down my neck to my body. What are you in such a mood about? Parvana's voice crashed through my daydreams. Given her tone, she was in a worse mood than usual. Nothing. Then stop your strange noises, she snapped. Esther and Isfur are sleeping in today. Last night was a terrible letdown. I clamped down on my humming and continued my polishing, but I couldn't hold in my question. Why? Have you not read the news, girl? She tapped at her bracelet and enlarged her hollow screen, projecting an article at me, because this idiot didn't even show up to his own party. I froze, Kev's piercing green and blue eyes staring back at me. The picture wasn't from last night, his military uniform replaced by a traditional Yazdi beaded robe and coronet. That's the prince? You're so stupid. Parvana stormed up the stairs, ruining half my work. Who else would it be? Upstairs, she slammed the door to her room. Thankfully, since I still stood there frozen. Kev, my Kev, was a prince. I had kissed an actual prince. Me, a nobody maid stuck on a foreign planet. He must have thought I was such an idiot not to know who he was. How did I not realize Kev was short for Keve? Prince Keve. I laughed. I was the only female at the ball not looking to become his wife, yet I had snagged his attention. If Esther and Isfur found out, they'd never end their shrieking. That thought brought me back to my senses. No one could ever know what happened last night. My life was already hard. I didn't need more misery. A few years ago, when money got tight, Parvana had threatened to sell me to Sutkin slave traders. Slavery was illegal, but so was making your own adopted child a maid. No one would envy the life I currently lived, but I knew my conditions would be worse if the Xanthi family grew tired of me. I had to be good until I had the credits to return to Earth. An electronic chime echoed through the house at the same instant my wristband buzzed. A delivery, probably. I approached the door and tapped at my holoscreen. The cameras captured the image of a Yazdi male with dark hair and blue-green eyes. I halted, hand almost on the doorknob. Prince Cave. Mez, help me. How did he figure out where I lived? I guess it wouldn't be too hard to find a human in Gulbar. Shit, what was I going to do? My everyday clothes resembled that of what a maid would wear. I didn't want him to see me like this. I scrambled to the closet and grabbed a cloak, despite the day's warm temperature. I huffed out a breath and smoothed my hair down. If I told him I was busy, surely he'd leave. He had to. But did I really want him gone? I twisted my lips into a pleasant smile and stepped out onto the porch. Chapter 7. Cave. When Izzie opened the door, the brightness of Yazd's suns highlighting the darkness of her hair, my heart nearly burst. After she ran from the garden last night, it took everything in my power to tamp down the urge to follow her. I tossed and turned all night, the ability to close my eyes and fall instantly to sleep destroyed by her mere introduction into my life. Immediately upon waking, I tasked Maven with finding her. It hadn't taken him long. My hands craved the touch of her skin like my lips craved her own, but I stayed put and dropped into a shallow bow. Izzie. She quickly closed the door and whispered, "You can't be here, Your Highness." I repressed a twinge. She had discovered who I was. I should have told her when I discovered she didn't know, but I hadn't wanted to ruin our moment. Had I destroyed everything between us, anyway? Good morning to you, too. I'm serious. With a furtive glance back, she pulled me away from the door and to the side of the porch. How did you even find me? It was easy enough to find out where the only earthling in the capital lived. I tried to keep a smile on my face, but at the sight of her distress, it slipped a little. I thought you'd be happy to see me. If you want me to go. She gripped my forearm. The touch of her sent tingles across my spine and along my nape. No, I am. I just can't let my family see you. Ah. Most Yazdi were rather open with affection and love, but some of the noble families were more conservative. I knew little about the Xanthus beyond what Maven told me this morning. So you want to keep us a secret? She flushed at my tone and grin. I'll play your game. It's not a game, she said, still glancing back at the house like her mother might storm out at any moment. I wouldn't give Lady Xanthi the chance. I took her hand. Come with me. I can't. Let me talk to your mother. I lured her toward the door like a shepherd to his herd of Orda. I can be very persuasive. No, no. Don't go in. She almost threw herself into the doorway to block my path. She truly didn't want her family to see me, then. Or was something else the matter? Maven had mentioned the Xanthus had financial issues. Perhaps there was something wrong with her house, but it appeared like every other stone manor on the street, with curving arches and wild gardens. She opened the door. Wait here. I'll ask. Give me a few minutes, okay? My heart nearly leapt with joy. As you wish. I crossed my hands behind my back as she disappeared inside. I hadn't imagined our connection. Thank Mez. If she had asked me to leave, I wouldn't betray her wishes, but Izzie wanted me here. I could tell even though she now knew I was a prince. Most females would be more excited upon learning the news, but Izzie remained the same. Another good sign for our future. Future. I stiffened at the thought. But when I searched within myself, I discovered it was true. I imagined a future with this female. After no time at all, Izzie rushed back out. She had removed her cloak for a plain gown in the bright green of Yazd's flag, like what females wore to Mez's temple. Perhaps her family did ascribe to the old ways. But none of that mattered, not when she was here, taking my hand with a smile on her face. I brought her hand to my mouth and kissed her knuckles. You look lovely. She blushed, the pink of her cheeks heightened by the red. Where are we going? When I had rushed here after speaking with Maven, I hadn't planned exactly where to take her. Izzie had frazzled me, ruining my usual smooth seduction. I considered my options. Somewhere private, definitely. An idea sparked. I know just the place. While the transport vehicle lowered in front of the Isahan's grand staircase, Izzie pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide. Built in the reign of the Karimi dynasty, the Isahan complex was hundreds of years old. Like the palace, it had towering sandstone walls and painted domed ceilings topped with spires. Its ornateness was a visible contrast to the more modern buildings surrounding it. "Wow," she said. "What is this place? You've never been to the Isahan Zoo?" It was a popular destination for families across Yazd. Because of construction, it was currently closed, making it the perfect place for a private outing. If we were to go anywhere in public and someone recognized me, Izzie's face would be splashed across the news, just like it was when she arrived on this planet in her childhood. I didn't want that for her. Today, we were simply Kev and Izzie, our families and responsibilities forgotten. I haven't, no. You'll love it. After we exited the vehicle, I took her small hand in mine. We walked up the marble steps toward the building. The buzz of construction became apparent as we stepped between towering columns and into the shade of the arcaded walkway. Through large doors, workers laid new tile in the lobby. But Izzie gaped past them to the ceiling, a mosaic of color soaring high above our heads. "This is so amazing." She spun under the peak of the dome, head thrown back. I can't imagine how much time it took. It takes hours to do my embroidery, and that's on a flat surface. I stopped beside her and peered up at the ceiling. I had never stopped to appreciate the artwork or beauty around me, but looking at it through her eyes gave me a whole new perspective. Someone cleared their throat. Under the archway leading out of the lobby, a Yazdi female in the uniform of an administrator dropped into a bow. I tugged Izzie from the lobby, whispering, "That's not even the best part." "Your Highness," the administrator said, "I have passes for you and your companion." I tapped at my wristband, accepting the passes. "Thank you. Please, enjoy your visit." While the administrator went left, I led Izzie to the right, down a simple hallway decorated with paintings. Her eyes bounced from side to side, enraptured by everything we passed. I almost felt bad for rushing her past the numerous masterpieces. But when we pushed through doors to an open-aired courtyard filled with a symphony of animal cries and squeals, the look on her face made everything worth it. Her jaw nearly hit the floor. Wow! Between wild hedges and fields of flowers, gilded cages contained animals from all across Yazd. Purple-winged Shirian lounged on man-made cropping of rocks, surveying their kingdom in the blistering sun. The horn of a Kargadon peeked out from a deep pond, spraying water in the air with a snort. A massive aviary in the center of the courtyard held a multitude of birds, their plumage all colors of the rainbow. Izzie drifted between the cages, such excitement on her face. If she had never left the city, all of these creatures would be new to her. After making 2 circles through the zoo, we took a seat on a bench in front of the aviary, sitting close enough that our legs touched. Relief speared through me at her presence. It was almost as if not touching her caused me physical pain. She must have agreed as her hand grazed across mine. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you come to this planet?" Maven had told me a bit and a news article shared more details of the story, but Izzie's arrival on Yazd was a mystery to most. "My parents were astronauts, that's the Earth word for someone who spends time in space." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "When I was 12, my parents volunteered the family to live on a space station. Scientists wanted to know how children would fare, I guess. At first it was scary to be away from home and all my friends, but looking back, that was probably the best time of my life. My whole family was together in one place with no one but each other to keep us company." "You were close with your family?" "Yes." Tears welled suddenly in her eyes. She glanced away and wiped at them. I'm sorry, this is so embarrassing. Don't apologize. I opened my arms. Without prompting, she leaned into me. If you don't want to tell me, you don't have to. She relaxed into my touch. I've never told anyone before, but I want to tell you. I waited for her to be ready. I wanted to know everything about Izzie, even the tough parts. I had cared for previous lovers, but I hadn't ever craved to know and be known like I did with this female. I stroked her hair, her body relaxing against me. I don't know how it happened, really, she stared hesitantly, searching for the words. I don't remember much. We had lived on the space station for a few months when suddenly, I woke up on an alien ship. They must have transported me somehow. Earth didn't know about aliens back then and we didn't have any shielding technology. She rubbed at her hand, where the faint line of a scar marred her pale skin. There were a bunch of other kids on the ship. How did you get away? I don't think I did. She pursed her lips, glancing off into the distance. Past the aviary and the other zoo animals to something only in her memory. They checked us for marks on our neck. I have a birthmark there, but when they saw it, something wasn't right. They cut my hand, and that somehow confirmed it. I don't really know how. How odd. I had never heard of kidnappers like that. Before fighting in the war on Hathor, I had worked to stop trafficking across the Intergalactic Alliance, both on ally planets and those under our protection. Izzie's story was unique. Did the investigators ever discover more? Some officers had me look at a catalog of different alien species, but none of them fit what little I remember. I'm sorry. It's okay. It's all in the past. With a small shake to her head, she twisted toward me, her dark eyes searching mine. How about you? Any painful childhood memories you want to dredge up? I reached for a lie, my gut instinct, but I didn't want to hide my true past from Izzie. Life as a prince had more benefits than most, but not everything had been simple. I watched my sister die in front of me. She flinched. Oh, Mez. I'm so sorry, Kev. I shouldn't have asked. Don't feel sorry. I started this. Izzie interlocked her fingers through mine. How did she die? My sister and I were the best of friends, I said, the words flowing far easier than expected. We did everything together, including training. My parents wanted us all to know how to pilot gliders. I challenged Zyra to a race, but her engine failed. I glanced at our interlocked hands. If my sister had lived, would she have liked Izzie? In another life, they might have been the best of friends. There wasn't anything anyone could do to save her. And you still became a pilot? My mother had asked the same question. In one of the rare few times she had exited her chambers since Zyra's death, I had told her about my plans to enroll in our military academy and become a pilot. She had shouted at me, her fear almost palpable. When I'm in the air, it's like she's there with me. Zyra loved to fly. Izzie squeezed my hand in response. I focused on where we touched, the warmth of her skin pulsing through mine. Pale white on bronze, earthling on Yazdi. So different in so many ways, yet also similar. Though my family lived, I wasn't close with my father or elder siblings. I had only had my sister and mother. They were both gone now, out of reach in the same way Izzie's birth family had been for the last decade. I wanted to know why she hadn't returned to them when Earth joined the Intergalactic Alliance, but the mood had already dropped far enough. I rose from the bench and offered her a hand. We never shared a dance last night. Probably for the better. A wild flush crept her cheeks. I've never danced with anyone before. Really? A girl from your social class? My family doesn't let me out much. They think I'll embarrass them. That's ridiculous. You're absolutely perfect. I dropped into a bow, my hand still reaching for hers. Izzie, may I have this dance? She nervously tucked strands of dark hair behind her ear, but after a moment, grasped my hand. You may. I whirled her into my arms, summoning a laugh from deep within her. Our pasts may have been dark, but this happiness here was our future. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. Chapter 8. Izzie. Meet me at the edge of Raver Park. When Kavea's message flashed across my holoscreen, I almost dropped the dress I was tailoring. It had been 2 days since Kaveh and I had visited the zoo and danced between the cages, laughing and talking. I had almost convinced myself the time we spent together was a dream. A prince couldn't be into me, could he? It didn't make sense. I was plain Izzie, little more than a servant. But he didn't know that. To him, I was Lady Xanthi, born on Earth but raised on Yazd. That should matter to me, but I found it didn't. I want to spend more time with Kaveh. Wanted to kiss him and touch him and know him. A tingle crawled up my spine just at the thought. I rubbed at my neck. It was almost like the star-shaped birthmark on my nape twinged when I thought of him. My wristband dinged again. Izzie. I glanced around. Parvana and my sisters were out having tea with a neighbor. If I left a note that I was going to the market, they wouldn't think anything out of place unless I returned empty-handed. Luckily, I had spent years cultivating the right friendships. I messaged Kaveh that I'd see him in half an hour before compiling my grocery list for Omid, the grocer. I'd have to pay for my own credits for the delivery, but it was well worth it to see my alien prince. If only the Izzie of a week ago could see me now, sacrificing my hard-earned money for a boy. But with my grocery list sent and my maid uniform switched for the only other nice dress I owned, I headed off into the city, a skip to my step. When I entered Raver Park, I easily navigated to the edge of Raver Forest. As Gulbar was a desert city, all the greenery was artificial, but that didn't take away from the beauty of the twisting trees and orange-flowered bushes. I forgot all that beauty in the presence of Kaveh. He rose from a bench, a fanged smile stretching across his bronze face. I waved, already blushing. He was handsome, yes, tall and strong, but my attraction to him seemed deeper than that. Something that rippled through my very soul. Was this what love felt like? I shook away the thought. It had only been a few days. I couldn't love Kaveh, could I? Once I was close enough, he pulled me into a hug. Good day, my lady. I breathed in his scent as he held me. Thick and woodsy with a hint of spice, a smell I knew well after this week. I pulled back in his arms but didn't break his touch. Where are we headed? It's a surprise. I hit his chest playfully. That's what you said last time. And did you not enjoy the surprise? I mock grimaced. I did. Well, then you will again. I gave an exasperated sigh, but honestly, it didn't matter where we went. I just wanted to be with him. Despite my better judgment, I was falling for this unabashed prince. Kaveh took my hand and led me into the forest. Oh, Mez, how I wished he wasn't a prince. Maybe then a human would be a suitable enough partner. Even then, I would be pushing my luck. I wasn't born on an advanced planet, and though I carried the Xanthi name, I wasn't a true Yazdi. Lady Parvana would never bless my union. What are you thinking about? He squeezed my palm, summoning me from my thoughts. You look so serious. Nothing important. I wouldn't let my doubts ruin this. What if this was the only chance we had? If Parvana found out, she'd get rid of me instantly. I wanted this to last forever, but what if it didn't? My only guarantee was today. We walked in silence through the unbridled Yazdi nature, simply enjoying each other's company. I subconsciously leaned closer and closer to his side, reveling in the warmth his body gave off. After a few minutes, he led us off the trodden-down path into what appeared like a bush. But I trusted him. Wherever Kaveh led me, the result would be magical. Kaveh pushed through a cluster of branches. We're here. And where is here? He swept his arm forward, clearing the last bit of brush, and revealed a spring of crystal-clear water. My exhale came out in a soft gasp. The water was the brightest blue, like a beach in the Caribbean I had visited once with my family. I had always dreamed about going back. Maybe I never would, but this was just as perfect. Kaveh kicked off his shoes. The water's quite refreshing this time of year. I stiffened, the implications settling in. Warmth pulsed through my chest, rising in me like a fog. I didn't bring a bathing suit. What is a bathing suit? He asked, tugging at his shirt. Mez, protect me. It's something you wear in the water. Why would you wear clothes in the water? It's so constricting. And with that, his shirt hit the dirt, exposing his chiseled bronze abs to the glistening sunlight. His muscles flexed with every movement, power contained within the layers of cord and sinew. I somehow managed to form a sentence. For modesty. To cover certain parts. Kaveh glanced over at me, thumb slipping under his waistband. The grin that spread across his face just about killed me. That takes half the fun out of the date. Kev. He peeled off his pants in a smooth movement. His toned legs and the curve of his ass belonged in a museum, but it was the length of his near-gilded cock that snagged my attention. I had never seen a naked man before, but I should have realized a 7-foot-tall male would have an enormous, appendage. The warmth within me flared into a burning inferno, a wet heat that pulsed with every rapid beat of my heart. Kaveh winked, before turning and slipping into the spring. Join me, Izzie. Join him. I knew Kev wouldn't do anything against my wishes, but why did it feel like if I took this step, the outcome was inevitable? I instantly knew the answer. Because I wanted this. After years of pushing down my desires, keeping my wits to survive each day, I wanted to do something reckless. I needed to touch him, to feel him inside of me. If I couldn't have Kaveh forever, at least I could have Kaveh today. With my gaze locked in his kaleidoscope eyes, I reached back and unclipped my dress. With a gentle shrug, it slid off my skin and pooled at my feet. The warmth of the sun beat against my skin, but nothing compared to how he looked at me. It almost burned, the same hunger I felt reflected in him. Kaveh reached up, his hand an offer and a seduction. I paused at the water's edge. Sensing my hesitation, he said, "We can stop at any point. You're in control, Izzie." "No, I want to. I'm just not quite sure how. I've never done this before." "There's nothing to fear." His fingers traced against mine, the touch a shot of electricity through me. "I'll take care of you." I stepped into the water, my foot settling onto a rock edge. The water lapped gently at my thighs. When Kaveh swam closer, tiny splashes tickled higher, eliciting a gasp from my throat. My entire body was like a live wire, sensitive to the briefest touch. Kaveh trailed his hands up my thighs until he cupped my ass. "You're beautiful, Izzie." I wanted to say something profound, but all I managed was, "You are, too." His lips quirked. But his eyes didn't stay on mine, instead lowering down my belly to the patch of dark curls over my heat. With me on the step and him in the springs, he was eye level with my core. I squirmed, both at the itch under my skin and in embarrassment. Did Yazdi females have hair down there? What if he didn't? Kaveh leaned forward and inhaled, the echo of a growl in the sound. I shivered as bumps trailed a path up my skin and my nipples hardened. Oh Mez. I wouldn't survive this. How could I, when he wasn't even touching me yet? Kaveh patted the rocks behind me. "Sit." The word was a command, and I obeyed, lowering until my bottom pressed against the sun-warmed rocks. The rough sensation against my hyperactive skin made the burning need within me so much worse. "Spread your legs." My nipples somehow got harder. I didn't think it was possible to feel this much arousal. How didn't people just combust during sex? My legs trembling in anticipation, I did as he said, exposing myself to him. I shivered at the breeze against my most sensitive flesh and at the look on Kevea's face. Like a starved man before a buffet, he licked his lips. I nearly twitched, the tension too much to handle. His hand settled on my knee, holding me in place. As he trailed his clawed fingers from my knee along the inside of my thigh, he murmured, "I'm going to fill your delightful heat with my cock, Izzie, but first, you'll receive my tongue. I'm going to devour you until you come." His next exhale tickled across my flesh. "Do you consent?" "Mez, yes, Kev," my sentence erupted into a groan as Keve pressed a kiss to my core. His other hand settled on my other knee, trapping me. Holding me still to receive this pleasure to burn within it, writhing and screaming. His tongue slid through my slit before he stopped at the top. His fong grazed against my clit. I nearly jumped, but there was nowhere to flee. Not that I wanted to run. The edge of teeth turning into the caress of a mouth, gentle and sucking. My back arched, head flying back. I moaned, not caring if anyone heard. "Oh, Keve." He settled into a rhythm of licking and sucking and tugging and biting. My eyes nearly rolled back into my head. I floated within my own body, almost wild with his touch. I gripped his horns, grounding me to reality. Keve let out a groan, the vibrations making me yelp. I stroked a hand around the curve of his horn, from base to tip. He gave me a warning nip. I grinned. Was that how he wanted to play it? With both hands, I rubbed around the base of his horns. Keve plunged a finger into my heat. I cried out again, my rubbing of his horns forgotten. The calluses of his skin stroked against my inner walls. I clenched around him, holding him tight, but he didn't stop. Keve was determined to torment me. Instinctively, I rocked my hips in response to the thrusts of his fingers, almost as if my body knew exactly what to do. I needed this. Needed him, needed release. The heat wound in my body, a tense buildup of energy that clawed within me like a beast. With one final flick of his fangs, I came undone. The world exploded around me, light and color swirling into one as I collapsed into a puddle. Mez, that was wonderful, Keve was wonderful. I slumped into the water, sinking into his strong arms. He nuzzled at my neck, kissing along my jaw. My hand lazily gripped at his shoulder. "Is that what it's always like?" "No, Shireen. That was so much better." Shireen. Old Yazdi for dear one, a term husbands used with their wives. I flushed, a buoyant feeling in my chest. I might only get Keve today, but he'd hold my heart forever. I shuffled in his arms. A thick hardness bulged against my thigh. Keve groaned. He had pleasured me, but what about him? I twisted in his arms until our lips grazed together. He kissed my nose. "Don't worry about me. Rest, Shireen." "What if I don't want to rest?" I threaded my hand through his thick strands of dark hair. "What if I want to be bold?" Keve's mouth parted, but no sound escaped beyond a gasp. I grinned wickedly, a mimic of his own entrancing smile. I wanted this male. All of him. For as long as I could hold on to him. Wrapping my legs around his waist, I positioned the head of him at the entrance to my heat. When we brushed together, we both groaned. "I want you, Kev. Right now and forever." I impaled myself on him. His thick girth expanded me, stretching my body taut. Tears wet my eyes, but I didn't care. Keve stayed still, his muscles tensing with barely constrained strength. But he didn't thrust forward, didn't force himself on me. I took him, inch by painful inch. Slow and torturous, yet delicious and deadly. My tight walls resisted him, but I used my leg around his waist to push him further in. My breathing became little more than pants. Keve gripped the rocks behind me, his claws digging in. "Izzie, I want to let you do this at your own pace, but you're killing me." "Mez, I might die." "Same," I panted. "Izzie." I trailed my hands through his hair and gripped his horns. I had surged forward as far as I could. My body hummed and hissed, an intoxicating mix of pleasure and pain. I glanced into his kaleidoscope eyes, wanting to stay within the twisting green and blue forever. "I'm ready, Cave." He snapped at the words. With a growl, he rammed into me, filling me entirely. My vision went white, a scream torn from my lips. My hold around his horns became a death grip. He was perfect. He was everything and too much. He was mine. Cave's thrusts turned wild, each pound eliciting a scream from my lips. My body writhed and rattled. The water around us lapped at my skin, at my breasts. Every sensation was too much, too overwhelming. Cave claimed me, fucked me. Branding me with every pound until my thoughts faded to a chant. Yes, 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 yesiases. More, 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 more. I hadn't even caught my breath from the last orgasm, but my body surged again, pushed toward another. My back arched, head thrown back. A whimper escaped my lips, a desperate plea. There had to be a limit to how much pleasure the human body could handle. "I can't take any more." "You can and you will." Cave caught my lips with his own, swallowing my response. Swallowing my scream. I exploded into stars. My body shuddered as my hot core clenched around his length. His thrusts became uneven, short bursts before he shuddered, releasing a hot stream into me. Cave broke the kiss to roar. Together, we sank into the spring's water, merged as one. Chapter 9. Cave. When we finished, I carried Izzie out of the water, her body limp in my arms. I placed her down gently on a thick patch of grass and curled at her side, my arms wrapped around her. She let out a satisfied sigh. For what felt like years, we lay in silence, complete and sated in each other's arms. Fate itself had brought her to me. I thanked Mez that she had been in that hallway and found me when she did. I knew none of the other females I could have met that evening would bring me this happiness. No other female in the universe compared. I rubbed my thumb along her chin. "Was it everything you expected?" "That was," she blinked slowly at me, almost blearily. "I just have no words. All I can say is I will never get enough of you." I smiled and tugged her closer. She shuffled her thigh, grazing it against my cock. Blood immediately rushed from my head to the needy appendage. "And I will never tire of giving it to you, Shireen." She chuckled softly, but her eyes remained closed. The sunlight and our touching bodies kept us blissfully warm, a lulling temperature. I traced a finger along her jaw, across the cords of her neck. I stiffened. A twisting of stars marked Izzie's neck, the shapes tugging at something deep within me. Was this her birthmark? Impossible. I had witnessed something like it before, on a friend and his mate's nape. "Izzie, has your birthmark always looked like stars?" "One star, yeah," she murmured. "One star." This wasn't one star. But she continued before I asked, "I think it's the reason the kidnappers chose me. All the other kids had star-shaped birthmarks, but none of the others had them on their neck." She shrugged, brushing her shoulder against the chest. "Maybe that was why they didn't want me." "I don't think that was why." The insistent pull within me continued, urging me from my slumber. My heart stuttered out a rapid beat. "It couldn't be, could it? Can you look at my neck?" Izzie finally opened her eyes, a frown spreading across her lips. I didn't give her the chance to counter me. I twisted and brushed my hair from my nape. Her gasp was the only answer I needed. Her fingers grazed my neck. "Oh, that's so weird. You have one, too. But it's multiple stars in a circular pattern." I twisted back to her, a sandstorm of emotions in my chest. I couldn't decipher them until one rose above the other, the warmth of pride. I caressed her cheek, exploring her face, her eyes with newfound wonder. Impossible. What is? My great-grandmother, my mother's grandmother, was a Herculean noble. The space between her eyebrows furrowed. And the stories my grandmother had told flooded back to me. The Herculean goddess Hera supposedly blesses people with mate bonds. The couple are the perfect match for each other, made for each other, almost. The bond only recently reappeared among the population, but in every case, the couple gets star-shaped marks on their neck. Izzie stiffened. What are you saying? I took her hands within my own, so small and fragile on a female so strong. Izzie, from the moment I first saw you, I knew you were special, and in this short time, I've come to love you. And now I know it's because we're meant to be. She stuttered for a moment, eyes wide. Don't be ridiculous, Kev. I've had this mark for years. That was true. Hera didn't always bless a couple right away with a mark, but it never occurred before the first meeting. But how else could I explain our matching marks? I certainly didn't have it during my last army physical. If only I could see the pattern and confirm it matched the twinkling of stars on her own. But I didn't need to see the mark to know it matched. Izzie was my mate. And suddenly, I realized the only possibility. When did you go to Adventureland? What? The theme park on your Earth? What are you, oh? She covered her mouth with her hand. You went there as a child. I nodded, my head a quick bobble. It was the only possibility that made sense. What if we met, even for just a moment? I didn't have a mark until recently, but if you had never gotten yours. She slumped back in the grass, bewildered, then I wouldn't be here today. Exactly. But was that a good thing? If it were true, the Herculean goddess or whatever biology caused mate bonds was responsible for all the pain Izzie had suffered. I wasn't worth that. In the few days we had known each other, I couldn't imagine her not being part of my life, but I would trade that for the childhood she deserved. Izzie seemed to have the same thoughts. Her dark eyes stayed on the sky, a swirl of emotions within them. I reached for her hand. A notification popped across my holoscreen, a message from Maven. I swiped it away. She grabbed my arms, holding me in place. When I glanced at her, her eyes were no longer on the sky, but fixed on my holoscreen. More specifically, on the time. Damn it. How did it get so late? I've got to go. I wiped away a frown before it even settled on my face. I'll have my attendant send us a ride to the park entrance. We'll be home soon. Soon isn't good enough. She pushed from the ground and grabbed for her dress. A nervous energy rippled through her entire body. Something wasn't right. What's wrong, Shireen? She paused, almost as if to debate her answer. I didn't interrupt, letting her come to her own conclusion. Her shoulders suddenly slumped. My family doesn't exactly treat me well. My blood shot straight to boiling. Tell me. She nibbled at one of her pale nails before crouching before me. I messaged them I was going to the market, but I've never taken this long before. They'll notice I'm gone. I didn't understand. Didn't want to understand. They'll be angry you were socializing outside of the house. Yes. Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down, embarrassed. They keep me busy with work inside the house. What are you keeping from me, Izzie? Whatever it is, you can trust me. Izzie looked back up at me. I'm not a Xanthi lady, Kava, I'm their servant. Rage rocketed within me, a blast of fury. I'd kill them. The Xanthus had adopted Izzie, paraded her around, only to treat her like a servant. Slavery was illegal on all the Intergalactic Alliance worlds, Yazd was no exception. But the Xanthus had gotten away with it. Izzie was human, with no one to protect her. I wanted to roar and run into the city, crashing down the ornate door to her fake family's manor, but instead I let the anger lurk, fester. Izzie needed me right now. I opened my arm for her, wrapping her in my heat. I'm so sorry, Izzie. That's no way to be treated. She shrugged listlessly. It could have been worse. If I landed on another planet, I could have been sold into a sex trafficking ring. The Xanthus never forget to remind me of that. I gently ran my knuckles across her jaw. You deserve so much more. How could I let her return home, knowing she'd be treated that way? The answer was I couldn't. Izzie couldn't return to the Xanthus. My hand traced down her jaw to her neck, where the mate bond marked us as a perfect match. In all my life, there'd never be another like Izzie. I swallowed, suddenly nervous. You're aware I'm supposed to be looking for a wife? Izzie jumped from my arms like I'd set on fire. Stop, Cave. Please. I can't do this. She paced to the forest's edge, but I followed her, a breeze against my bare skin. Marry me, Izzie. Be my wife. My princess. I'm not the kind of girl you take home to your family, especially your royal family. I'm nothing. I'm a maid. I don't care about that. I want you. I want to spend every day with you, protect you from any harm. I reached for her, but this time she flinched. Had I rushed this delicate thing between us? Don't worry about your family or mine. I can keep you safe from them. She twisted toward me, eyes wet with tears. Cave. I pulled her back to me, her head barely reaching my shoulders. She remained tense for a moment, but with a soft caress, every bit of resistance melted away. Yes, Cave. I'll marry you. I twirled her around and claimed her mouth with my own. My arms wrapped around her waist as I plundered her, a branding with my tongue. She moaned, sinking into my hold. Her hands trailed my chest, across my pecs to my abs. My cock twitched to life. Mez, I'd never let this female go. I love you, Izzie. And I love you. She brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. But I still have to get home. You have to tell your parents and, I have to tell mine. A part of me rebelled at the thought of being parted, of letting her return to that prison, but I'd do anything to make her happy. One night. I'll tell my parents and send transport to you tomorrow. I won't let you be a servant anymore, Izzie. You're mine now, just as I am yours. Chapter 10. Izzie. A smile stretched across my face as I mopped the kitchen floor. Yesterday with Cave had been absolutely incredible. Muscles I didn't even know I had were sore, but I still craved more of him. I couldn't believe that I had found love. Cave filled my every waking thought. I'd think of something randomly and instantly want to share it with him. Despite my rather boring life, abduction aside, he was so interested in everything I said. In my 10 years on Yazd, he was the first person who wanted to understand me. Just like I wanted to understand him. I wanted to be with him forever. A single week wasn't enough. But I pushed that thought back. Cave still hadn't contacted me yet. What if his parents said no? I didn't think that would stop him, but I couldn't be sure. The mate bond mark on my neck flared at the thought. No, it was right, he wouldn't do that to me. But I couldn't be sure either of our families wouldn't get in the middle of us. What are you smiling at, Isabel? Parvana appeared in the kitchen doorway, a frown marring her bronze face. You look deranged. I immediately washed the grin away. Nothing, mother. Her brow remained furrowed, but she pushed aside her suspicion. Momentarily. At this rate, she'd find out about Cave sooner rather than later. I need you to show me Esta's dress for the party I mentioned this morning. The ribbons for her hair must match perfectly. Let me bring it down from my room. I leaned the mop against the wall and wiped my hands on my apron. I'll meet you in the sitting room. Does it look like I have all day? Parvana snapped. Take me to the dress, unless you have something to hide. No. And while that wasn't the truth, Parvana would find no evidence of Cave or my former escape plans in my bedroom. I hid everything dear to me, even though I couldn't remember the last time Parvana had set foot in the attic. Nerves tingled through my arms, but I pushed the feeling away. She couldn't suspect anything, could she? Either way, I had no choice but to lead her up the stairs. When we entered the room, I went straight for the mannequin. Esta had picked the dress from a designer's widely available catalog, but wanted adjustments to make it more unique. I'd shortened the train and added beading to the skirt. My fingers still ached from all the stitches. If only the Xanthus would buy a newer materializer, which allowed such tailoring without a scissor and needle. Parvana observed from the threshold to my room. That will do nicely, Isabel. Thank you, Mother. I expected her to leave, but she remained in the door. Do you know what party we're attending tonight? No. Parvana and my sisters attended so many parties, I had lost track. When she had asked for a dress tailored at the last minute this morning, I thought nothing of it. The king invited us to the palace, she said, baring her sharp teeth. A sinking feeling flooded my stomach. He did. He did. Parvana pursed her lips in mock innocence. Did you not get the message? Oh, wait, you wouldn't have, as I disconnected your holoscreen from our family plan. I almost dropped to the floor. You what? Parvana stormed into the room, invading my space. I had to crane my neck to see her face. I know what you've been up to with the prince. Did you really think I didn't notice you sneaking around? Mother. She slapped me. Pain exploded through my cheek, but I forced my tears to stay hidden. Don't call me that. I'm not your mother. Parvana exhaled, a calming hiss. Luckily for me, your tryst will benefit this family. Your prince didn't specify to his father which Xanthi girl he wished to marry. Kave won't let you do this. Parvana was mad if she thought Kave would go along with whatever sham she planned. We were mated, our fates aligned by a literal higher power. I clenched my fists and held her gaze for the first time in my life. If he wants you to live, he'll do so. Fear invaded my anger as goosebumps crawled my skin. You're going to sell me to slavers, then? I wish, girl. Parvana rolled her eyes and tapped at her gilded bracelet, summoning her holoscreen to life, but no, there was hardly time to arrange that. Your prince won't know it, but you're going back to Earth. Out of every possibility, that answer surprised me the most. What? I've paid for your passage. The ship leaves in 10 minutes. She flicked through her screen until she landed on a ticket with my name on it. Isn't this grand news, Isabel? You've wanted to return to Earth for years. Now that the planet is part of the Intergalactic Alliance, you can. A week ago, I jumped for joy at the idea of returning home. I still wanted to go one day. My parents and brother still lived there, Mez willing. But if I returned to Earth, would I be able to come back? I had found Kave, our paths entwined. But no. Her claws dug into my arm, nearly drawing blood. I have been gratuitous and kind to you for years, providing you a place to live and sleep. Dressing you. Feeding you. This is my last mercy. Pack a bag and return home. Isabel Yazd will never accept a human princess. My Isfur will make a perfect wife to Prince Kave. Her grip tightened. You're getting on that ship, no matter what. Even if I have to drug you. No. If she drugged me, there was no chance of escape. But if I stayed quiet and obedient, surely I'd have an opportunity to run. Transport ships didn't make it a habit of imprisoning their clients. Once I was out of Parvana's grasp, I'd make my move. I bowed my head, once again becoming the Isabel Parvana expected. May I get changed, ma'am? Her kaleidoscope eyes remained narrowed, but I could hardly travel in my maid uniform, stained with chemicals. You have 1 minute. Parvana left the room, but the stairs didn't squeak when the door closed behind her. She remained close. Too close. I rushed to my dresser and pulled out the first dress I laid my hands on. But if I wanted to guarantee my success, I'd need more than a nice dress. I ripped my uniform off and hurled the new gown on, already twisting toward my baby, nearly tripped, but kept my footing. Dropping to my knees, I trailed my hands against the edge of the mattress. When I touched the soft edge of my drawstring purse, I tugged. The credits within the bag clattered lightly. Years of saving, only for Parvana to purchase my ticket. But if something went wrong, I'd need what little money I had. If I got trapped on the streets of Gulbar or even on another planet, I had another way to sustain myself for a day and hopefully contact Kave. Parvana barged in right as I shoved the purse into my bra. I dusted a hand down my front, smoothing the ruffles in my gown. "I'm ready, ma'am." She held out her hand. "Wristband. I can't have you contacting anyone." Gritting my teeth, I handed it over. "Good." She pulled a little circular device from her pocket. "Hold this." "What is?" Parvana tapped at her hollow screen and a light blinked on the little device. A numbing tingle crawled my legs. The world flashed white for a brief second before returning to color. The tiny square of a room I'd known for years had disappeared, replaced by a ship's cabin of equal size. A bed pressed against the wall and an open sliding door led to a miniature washroom. The cheapest cabin, all Parvana needed for her human servant. Former human servant. For once, I was free. But I couldn't revel in those feelings. I hiked my skirts and started for the exit. Only to run into a muscled back. With a gasp, I stumbled back. A huge Yazdi turned around and crossed thick arms across his robed chest. Excuse me." He didn't move. Parvana had hired security to keep me on the ship. What a bitch. I glared at the mountain of a male, but he didn't move. Fine. If he didn't respond to that, I knew something he'd respond to. "How much did she offer you?" He didn't move, but his kaleidoscope eyes remained on my face. "Not much, I'm presuming. The Xanthus barely have any money." I pulled the drawstring bag from within my dress. "Here. Take this and let me go." He weighed the bag in his hand. Did he not speak? Had Parvana hired a mute? "Or I could take this and leave you locked in your room," he grumbled. I didn't let my shoulders droop under the despair. This is a passenger ship. It has its own security. If I scream and tell them you're not here as my protection but as my jailer, whose side do you think they'll take? The fines for trafficking are ridiculously high. They won't risk it. He glared, but shuffled out of the way. I dashed from the cabin, not looking back. Few people wandered the hallways. This ship was probably minutes from takeoff. I skirted down corridors like a rat in a maze, following the glow of exit signs. The brightness of the Yazdi suns came into view, shining through a doorway. I tossed myself through it, disregarding the crew member who shouted we were nearing takeoff. I didn't care. My feet on the ground, I ran from the ship. Freedom. Finally. I dropped to a bench, my adrenaline rush fading. My breath came out in quick pants. The crew member who had yelled at me shrugged and closed the door, locking it shut. The engines revved, blocking the sounds of the city around me. I watched the cruiser rise, heart in my throat. I had evaded the first obstacle, but there was one more I had to conquer first. I pushed to my feet, glad I hadn't changed out of my work shoes. The shipyard was on the far side of the city from the palace. Without any credits or holoscreen, I had a long walk ahead of me. I straightened my shoulders and put one foot in front of the other. For Kave and my happy ending, I wouldn't stop. Chapter 11. Kave. I brushed a hand across the medallions lining my shoulder for the third time in a row. "You look splendid, Your Highness," Maven said at my back. Did I? I had never been self-conscious, but standing here, decked in the flowing robes of a prince, I had never felt more out of place. I had insisted on wearing the medallions, the glinting shurians I earned with blood and sweat and sacrifice, but would anyone even notice over the gilded coronet circling my head and my horns? Izzie would. I warmed at the thought of my mate. My parents were overjoyed to learn I found someone, though my father didn't believe in Herculean goddesses any more than he believed in Mez. He had wanted to throw a grand ball to announce my engagement, but I insisted on a smaller event. Tonight would be family only, mine and Izzie's. Not that the Xanthus were her true family. As an engagement present to her, I planned on announcing their crimes and having them arrested. My father wouldn't abide having slavers at his dinner table, though he'd be enraged at me for not telling him of my plan. I swiped at my hollow screen. No reply from Izzie. Her mother had accepted my father's request hours ago. Had something gone wrong? There was never any reason to strike a female, but if Parvana Xanthi hurt my Izzie, my vision nearly went red, a growl climbing my throat. Your Highness? Maven asked, one dark eyebrow cocked. I settled, forcing a smile to my face. Thank you for your help, Maven. You've always been the best attendant. Thank you, sir. Maven's wristband must have buzzed, since he glanced down. His kaleidoscope eyes widened. Her Royal Majesty is here. Her Royal Majesty. I rushed to the door. My mother hadn't left her quarters and courtyards in years. My room wasn't far from my parents' suite, but everything outside her four walls was too far for my mother. But when I pulled the door open, there she stood in her finest beaded gown, her horns twined with gilded wire. Without warning, she tugged me into a hug. My baby. My cave. You look like a male grown now. Because I was, not that she would know. When Zyra died, she had all but abandoned me to be raised by staff. What 14-year-old didn't need his mother? But the thought didn't bother me as much as it Hottie had never shared my strife, but now that I had Izzie, the burden I carried was lighter on my chest. Mother, I said gently. She pulled back in my arms before I could continue. I'm sorry, my son. I was a terrible mother. You deserved so much better than me. I almost flinched. Out of loyalty and respect, I'd never say such a thing aloud. But I didn't have to. My mother had known all along. I searched within me for anger, but all I could find was sadness. I understand. Zyra, she swallowed and bowed her head. Zyra's death does not excuse me for abandoning you. I should have been stronger. She gripped my shoulders, those slitted eyes on mine once more. But here you are without me, chosen by Hyra herself. My grandmother told me many stories about mate bonds. Her own parents had one. The goddess answered your prayers when I could not, providing you with the family we never gave you. You did your best, mother, and she had. I couldn't imagine the pain of losing a child. Losing a sister had been terrible enough. Maven cleared his throat from farther into my quarters. I'm sorry to intrude, your majesty, your highness, but the Xanthus have arrived at the dining hall. Thank you, Maven. My mother smiled kindly at my attendant before offering me her arm. Let me escort you, Cave. After everything, it's the least I can do. I tucked her small arm within mine. I'd be honored, mother. We walked in peaceful silence down the long halls of the palace. When we entered the dining hall, the sandstone walls glistening with gold and gems, my gaze went straight to my father, kissing Parvana Xanthi's hand. In a lavish gown of feathers, the matron Xanthi preened at all the royal attention. I resisted a scoff, an unpleasant taste in my mouth. How Izzie had become the female she was with Parvana as a role model astounded me. But where was Izzie? Her sisters stood at Parvana's back, marveling at the grandness of our dining hall. If my brothers were here, they'd be making polite talk with my future sisters-in-law, but I had asked for only my parents to attend. There was no need to embarrass the Xanthus in front of my entire family. But none of that mattered, not if I couldn't find my Izzie. I stopped in the shadows of the open doorway and gestured to a guard. He stood at attention. Where is the third Xanthi daughter? The guard frowned. There is no third, your highness. Panic flared through me, but I kept it down. When enemies struck, a pilot had to keep their head if they wanted to survive. In a way, court politics were just as deadly. But I refused to play games with my mate's life. My mother immediately noticed the tension. "What's wrong, Cave?" Her voice echoed through the dining hall, silencing all conversation. My father and Parvana twisted toward me, as did the Xanthi daughters. A blotching of bright orange flared across the younger's cheeks, but the elder remained cold-eyed. "Ah, Prince Cave." Parvana crossed the dining hall to my side at a leisurely pace. Like she had already won. "I'm delighted to make your acquaintance. My daughter has told me so much about you." I resisted the urge to sink my claws into her flesh. "Where is? May we speak in private?" I glared, and Parvana flashed me an oily smile. My father's brows furrowed, but I pulled the matron Xanthi aside. I didn't want him involved in this, not yet. King Adashir had a temper and might act first without thinking of the consequence, namely, Izzie's life. When we were far enough away, I dug my fingers into her arm, careful not to break skin. "What have you done with Izzie?" "What I should have done years ago." Cold stabbed through my heart. "Sold her to slavers. You'll never see her again." She pulled her arm from my grip. "But if you marry Isfur, I'll ensure Isabel's safety." "You're insane." "No, Your Highness, I'm desperate," Parvana snarled. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything. You'll do anything to get it back. Marry Isfur and save Isabel. That is my offer." That was no offer. It was blackmail with my mate's life. I wouldn't stand for it. I searched Parvana's gaze. She was desperate, yes, but also overconfident. Another prince, once who didn't have experience with war and combat, might kowtow to her demands, but I didn't negotiate with criminals. Especially when they were bluffing. "Guards," I started. Shouts echoed down the hallway and into the dining hall. One voice, pitched to a yell. A familiar voice, one I'd know anywhere. Parvana grabbed at my sleeve, but I pulled from her grasp. Nothing would stop me, least of all her. Before I reached the door, the guard I spoke to earlier entered, his holoscreen displaying some message before him. "Your Highness, the gate guards apprehended an earthling female claiming to be Isabel Xanthi. We've brought her inside." Yes, let her in," I shouted, barreling through the mail behind me. My father called, "What is the meaning of this?" I ignored every question thrown my way as Izzie came into view. 2 guards dragged her down the hall. She had twisted her dark hair in a bun, but strands escaped to form a fizzy halo around her head. The hem of her simple gown was ripped and stained with dirt. Where had Parvana sent her? Had she escaped and walked here on foot? I rushed forward ready to wrap her in my arms. "Cave." When the guards released her, she threw herself into my grasp. I pressed my face to her head and breathed in her sweet scent. We never should have parted ways. If I had brought her home with me and told my parents right away, none of this would have happened. I patted my hands down her sides. "Are you injured?" "I'm okay." She cupped my cheeks. "I'm fine, really." "Cave." I twisted, not releasing Izzie from my grasp. My father and mother stood in the hall behind me while the Xanthis crowded the doorway gripping hands with my mate. I smiled down at her. "This is my mate, father. Izzie, meet my father, King Adashir." "Father, this is Isabel Xanthi, Parvana's adopted human daughter, or should I say her live-in slave." "Your Majesty." Parvana rushed forward. My father held up a hand. Silence. But he didn't speak right away. He had wanted me to marry a Yazdi noble's child. While Izzie technically qualified, she was human. Not exactly what my father had imagined when I told him I mated with a Xanthi. Whatever he said, nothing would change between me and my mate. Nothing could separate us. My mother stepped forward first. "Welcome, Isabel. I'm overjoyed to meet my new daughter." Izzie flushed. "It's a pleasure, Your Majesty. Please, call me Mina." My mother's acceptance was all my father needed to rip out of his thoughts. He twirled on Parvana and snapped his claws in her direction. My father wasn't the biggest fan of humans, but he hated slavers more. "Captain, arrest this female." "Your Majesty," Parvana cut off as guards surrounded her and grabbed her by the arms. She snarled, but couldn't break their grips. With one last roar, she turned on Izzie. "You little bitch, you always ruin everything." Izzie watched her silently, dark eyes unfeeling. "Are you well, Shireen?" I asked. She curled into my side. "I am now. She's just not worth my time. None of them are." At that, Isfur and Esta flinched, drawing attention their way. My father frowned at them, but it was subdued. "Your mother's crimes are not yours. Leave my sight at once." And with that, the two Xanthi sisters scurried from the hallway. Maven gestured after them. "I'll ensure they leave." "Thank you." Nothing mattered besides comforting my mate. My mother tugged on my father's sleeve and gestured him into the dining hall. Within seconds, all the guards followed, leaving me alone with Izzie. I wrapped my hands around her and stroked her back. "Really, I'm okay." She threaded her hands through my hair. "I'm finally free." "And what will you do with your newfound freedom, Shireen?" Her lips twitched into a beautiful but mischievous grin. "I don't know, my prince. Did you have any plans?" "I have one." With a quick call to my friend, Prax, I had consulted his human wife on what earthlings expected from their future husbands. I reached into my pocket for the golden ring topped with a glowing orange jewel. Dropping to my knees, I held it before my mate, my Shireen. The only female for me in all the stars. "Isabel, will you marry me?" She bent over and captured my lips in a quick kiss. I wrapped my hands around her and pulled her into my lap. Her moan spurred me deeper, claiming her with my touch. A heat filled me, racing to my cock. Would my parents be mad if I abandoned their dinner plans? Yes, but I didn't care. I picked Izzie up. With a quick yelp, she broke the kiss. "Where are we going?" "I think I invited you there once," I said. "My bedroom." Her cheeks flushed. "Oh." I grinned, a wicked twist of lips. "You haven't answered my question." "Haven't I?" Izzie kissed a path along my jaw until she reached my ear. After a tug to my earlobe, she said, "Yes, Kave, I'll marry you." "Of course I will." It took everything within me not to sprint down the hall. My mate. My Shireen. My Izzie. Epilogue. Izzie. My foot tapped restlessly against the leg of the high-backed chair as I gripped the plush velvet elbow rests. The Eagan Embassy in Houston had been a hotel in its former life and, while part of the building was under construction, the sitting room remained generically upper class. But the bland wallpaper, high ceilings with dripping chandeliers, and regal furnishings were the least of my concerns. All my focus remained on the clock. Kave reached across the little side table between our chairs and placed his hand on mine. "They'll come, Izzie." I tore my attention from the clock to my mate's kaleidoscope eyes. "Are you sure? It's been 10 years. You're their daughter." Just the word almost triggered a panic attack. After a decade of dreaming, I had finally returned to Earth, to my home city. Everything was so familiar and yet so foreign. The cars, the technology, the clothes, nothing was like I remembered. Somehow, despite all the horrors the Xanthas put me through, Yazd had become my home. All I needed was a family. I placed my other hand on top of Kavea's, letting the warmth of him calm me. On the side table between us sat an ornate envelope, the reason we were here today. King Adashir had approved Kavea's proposal, but the wedding was still a month out. Between all the preparations, we had just enough time to fly to Earth and invite my family. But we had to find them first. It hadn't been hard to do. As my parents were astronauts, there were dozens of articles about them. Cave had requested access as soon as we boarded the ship. I had spent hours reading everything I could find. NASA had reported my disappearance as a death, probably at the insistence of the government. The whole world had mourned my loss, the first child to die in space. Unsurprisingly, my parents returned to Earth with my brother shortly after and continued their work from the ground. My father now had tenure at a university and my mother traveled the world as an author. If my brother's social media was any indication, he had recently started university and lived on campus with his girlfriend. They had moved on, lived full lives without me. And here I was, trying to drag them back to the past. I pushed from my seat. They aren't coming, Cave. Izzie. I get it, I do, I said, holding back my tears. They buried and forgot me long ago. They have lives here. Cave gently tugged me to him, until my knees hit his. They're just late, Shireen. I don't need them. I tugged at my mate, trying to pull him to his feet, but he easily resisted. You're my family, Yuri, all I need at the wedding. Cave sat forward and wrapped his arms around my waist. He pressed his chin against my belly, looking up at me with those entrancing eyes. Warmth blossomed within me. I caressed a line down the sharp edges of his face. Mez, my mate was perfect. Kind and handsome and somehow all mine. The door clicked open behind us. I pulled from Cave's arms and spun as a green-scaled Iegan attendant entered. Yaz didn't have its own embassy near my parents' house, but luckily Cave's Iegan friend had put in a kind word for us. The attendant dropped into a shallow bow before saying, Mr. and Mrs. Alwyn are here, your highnesses. My heart nearly burst in my chest. They were here. The world started spinning, and I stumbled back. Cave rose behind me and wrapped me in his arms. Holding me up and holding me together. Please show them in, my mate said. The attendant disappeared out the door with a nod. I twisted in Cave's arms, my heart near racing, my breath escaping in fast pants. Kev. I'm sure they never stopped loving you, Izzie. Just like I'll never stop loving you. Oh, Kev, I lured him toward me. He bent until my lips could touch his. A fire burned within me, a near constant since meeting Cave, but I resisted the urge. I hadn't seen my parents in 10 years. I didn't want our reunion marred by a heavy makeout session. I tapped my forehead to his, relishing his nearness. Izzie? Is that you? Everything within me froze at the voices, ones I had imagined time and time again for years. An older human couple stood in the doorway, their dark hair streaked with gray and wrinkles lining their pale skin. My father had glasses now and my mother wore her hair short, but I'd recognize them anywhere despite the changes. I licked at my lips, my throat suddenly dry. My father stayed in the doorway, but my mother drifted closer, their faces equally stunned. Mom. Oh, Izzie. She rushed forward with a cry and pulled me into her arms. Tears rushed down my face. I sunk into her arms, once again a child. I had wanted this for so long. Dreamed of this moment from the second I woke on a slaver's ship. I wrapped my arms around my mother and inhaled, sucking in her scent. My exhale escaped in a sob. I pulled from her grasp, but didn't go far. Where's Jacob? His flight will arrive in a few hours, my dad said. He's attending Berkeley in California. I can't wait to see him. Though my parents didn't ask, their eyes drifting toward Cave, looming over us. I gently separated from my mother and took my mate's hand. Mom, Dad, this is Cave, my fiancé. My mother's jaw dropped and my father's eyebrows hiked nearly to his hairline. I simply smiled and leaned into Cave's side. I knew my return would be a shock, but I had never imagined it being quite this shocking. Kaveh dropped into a low bow. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Alwyn. My parents still didn't speak, stunned into silence. Might as well drop the other bombshell. I plucked the envelope from the table. We have so much to talk about, but first, will you attend our wedding? We'll have to leave in a few days to reach Yazd in time. You're getting married in space, my dad whispered. Yeah. He tugged me and Kaveh into a hug, his face streaked with tears. With another cry, my mother joined. Of course, sweetie. We'd love to attend your wedding. If my parents and mate weren't holding me up, I'd crash to the floor. Over my mother's shoulder, I meet Kaveh's eyes. In them, I saw a universe of love and happiness. This was my future. Not as a slave, but as a woman who loved an alien prince, surrounded by family on all sides. I couldn't have wished for a better dream come true. Be continued. If you enjoyed the book, be sure to like it and consider subscribing for more. If you would like to listen to the full version of the book, please visit Amazon.com to purchase the book. Thank you for listening.